Okay, so this is the story of the day I survived having my throat slit by my boyfriend at the time. It was a murder suicide. He cut both of our throats, and I have a lot of defensive wounds. He cut my bottom lip in half, he cut my left ear in half, he cut the back of my neck. He stabbed me in the back um, of my shoulder, and he cut that was a major a major one. That was a major one. He almost cut my hand off because the knife went down, cut through the tendons on my right hand because I put my hand out, and he cut down into my pointer and middle finger, and those are pretty much the the most extensive wounds. I have some smaller ones too. And what happened that day, the strange thing was that it was like every other day, and when you're living a life of chaos, like when you are addicted to hard drugs and you do like hard drugs every day to make it through the day, any given day you could like die. And when you date uh, someone who is mentally unstable and has a penchant for violence or potential violence, and I knew he did. You know, when you date someone who is emotionally and or physically abusive, or even just has that penchant to be really unpredictable, an unpredictable, potentially violent, potentially narcissistic, mentally unwell man especially is a very dangerous thing. And it was strange. I had abusive relationships in the past, physically and mentally. I had 20 years of really toxic, at best, just toxic, but unstable relationships, and I was mentally unsound until um, my mid 30s. So that's what I was attracted to. I was unstable when I was attracted to instability. And I'm weird. And he was probably, even before the events of this day, the weirdest person I'd ever met in a good way. He liked Carl Jung. He was really into psychology. He was really into astrology and astronomy. And he was really into art. And he was just this weird ass seeker, and those were the good things. And I was just so empty that, um, my life was coming to this crossroads where it was going to be like shit or get off the pot, as the saying goes. I was either going to die or I was going to change and find a way to live. So, yeah, I met this guy and he's weird. And he wasn't like physically abusive, and it was quite the opposite actually, but he was unpredictable. And we had a weird, very combustible dynamic because he was a combustible person, and that's the kind of person I was attracted to. And there's that saying like, oh, if your friends jump off a bridge, would you? And it's like, absolutely. And the strange thing about me is, at the time, for so long, I was so messed up mentally and insecure, and I felt like hollowed out, like empty internally, that I would definitely jump off a bridge if somebody else was at the time, but I also might just kind of be like, fuck it, and jump. um, I was kind of like oddly self-destructive and impulsive. So it seemed like a match, and it turned out to be a match made in like hell or heaven, depending on your perspective, which way you're facing. And so this day, July 19th, 2018, was like every other day. We got high, and we talked about the plans for the day. We cleaned my car. it seemed like he was not planning on having a psychotic break, which is what it was. It wasn't a premeditated thing. It was a psychotic break. And I know that because of the way he acted during the attack. So we got high on primarily crystal meth, which is another thing. If we had been doing opiates that day, or even cocaine, anything other than meth, it would have been more alarming when he kind of out of nowhere started having like getting real trippy, and he pulled a knife, his hunting knife that he'd been sharpening for like months. He started to hold this knife to his neck. Now, if we'd been doing, like I said, anything other than meth, that would have been really like disconcerting. But that's the scary thing about meth, is it's very unpredictable. And as a drug, not to mention the headspace it puts you in, is very unpredictable. So that was his reaction. And on top of that, I have a meth mind as well. I had just done this, large quantity of IV crystal meth. So my head was clearly not thinking clearly. Um, it's just kind of like par for the crystal meth course, that weird things are likely to happen, and you just kind of like roll with it. And your mind is so messed up. Meth is a really dangerous drug. It's too long lasting, too strong, too volatile, too unpredictable. It was like my boyfriend, that was like him. Too volatile, unpredictable, too long lasting, and too strong to be anything that was good for me. And once again, that was a large part of the reason why I was attracted to him. He was like a drug. Drugs were like a love. Like I said, it was a match made in hell. So we get high, everything's normal, talking about the events of the day and whatnot, and just kind of, getting high, just what we did. And I look over and he's like crouching in the corner, like Rambo style, like kind of like squatting with this sharpened hunting knife to his neck, and his eyes are like darting around, and his back's against the wall. We are in this tiny second bedroom of a single wide trailer, which is like a second bedroom of a single wide trailer. It's like the size of some people's closets, smaller than some people's closets. It's like the size of a closet. It's a tiny room, and he's pressed into a corner, like darting around. And it's like, okay, he's like having this like meth meltdown. It was normal. I wasn't scared for myself, and I wasn't scared for him because, you know, because it was the meth, and because he was weird, and because you don't think, even when all the conditions are set up, when unexpected like life or death situations happen, even when, like I said, there's the hindsight's 2020, when all the factors like are aligned for something bad to happen, nobody thinks this is going to be the day that my boyfriend's going to try to kill us. Like you can't see that coming. So I just didn't think he would do that. And I'm trying to like talk him off this proverbial ledge that I didn't really think he was on. And so I didn't, I went over to him because I felt safe, and even though I shouldn't, obviously, like I said, my mind was on drugs. My mind was just like so messed up. And who is really going to like try to kill you in this moment? And logistically, who wants to die in the middle of a fucking meth trailer in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, West Virginia? This is my logic, my illogical logic kicking in. And, that used to like perplex me. Like, first of all, it was a psychotic break. It wasn't premeditated, but when someone's having a psychotic break, there's no amount of reason. And when someone's having meth-induced psychosis, which can happen at any time, somebody is, I think we are all just one thought away from like, some type of episode or break, or like a snap from reality. We are all just one thought, one event, one circumstance away. And when you have someone who is mentally unwell doing a drug that's prone to delusions, and really, with meth, you get lost in delusions, unlike any other drug, maybe PCP, which I've never done, but it's a very dangerous drug in that way. So it's like you might as well, there's no amount of reason, you know, when someone's has like this snap from reality, it's like trying to put, I was trying to like be rational in my mind, but in reality, it was like trying to like put glasses on someone with like no eyes. Um, but I didn't know that at the time. Hindsight is 2020, as they say. And so I walked over to him and I tried to like placate his mind, which turned out to be an impossible feat. And he was on the ground and I crouched down to him, and it just happened really quickly that he kind of went to hug me. And I didn't, I was thinking, oh, he's going to put the knife down. I didn't think he was going to try to kill us. And it happened so fast that literally in the blink of an eye, what I think is like a hug, or just like, this is weird, but let's move on. Let's just go drive around, enjoy our high, whatever, has now turned into, he has me like in a bear hug. And he put his right arm around my shoulders and was holding a knife to my pocket knife he had gotten out of my pocket, was now holding it against my neck, against my jugular vein. It was a hawk-billed knife, so it was pointed and aligned with my jugular vein. And his left arm, he still had his gigantic hunting knife wrapped around me at the torso, like underneath his right arm. He'd wrapped his left arm around me, and it was like a bear hug. And he had the tip of his knife to his neck behind me. So it was like this weird bear hug standoff. And I thought, this is strange. And to tell you the truth, I wasn't even alarmed, because I still thought, this is just like this weird circumstance. I wasn't even scared. I noticed that our breathing was aligned. I noticed that his goatee was tickling the back of my neck. It was summertime in July, like the dog days of summer. It was really hot. And, it just almost felt like, I don't know, just almost like this white trash Romeo and Juliet, but not really. But that's how it felt. That's how screwed up my mind was. And I guess that was my delusion, was believing in us and believing in like these like mystical, imaginary powers of love, and believing that like I could change a man. And, just, I was so messed up. It took me, and part of it maybe was just a survival mechanism too. Like maybe it's just instincts to try to not go to think that you're actually going to like have to be fighting for your life in a moment. Maybe that's like some type of psychological like defense mechanism. I don't know. And so I thought, this isn't going to happen. And for a second, I just kind of sat there. I almost like leaned, he had the blade like pressed, aligned with my jugular, but kind of resting against my neck. And I kind of just leaned back. And like I said, we were breathing in unison. And I don't know. I just thought, this isn't not going to happen. It's just weird. But he was weird and so was I. So it was just this weird thing. And then all of a sudden, just like a minute later, a few seconds later, he started to like press the knife harder into my neck. And, I was trying to be compassionate at first, like, come on, let's just get out of here. Let's just go drive around or enjoy our high. And then all of a sudden, he started to press really hard, to the point where it dawned on me. It just clicked in an instant, what I should have seen before, what I should have seen like years before I even met him, like, this is my life. My life is at stake. Make better decisions. And once it dawns on me to make better decisions, my life is at stake. It's right before I'm about to die. And I panicked because he's pushing like this knife that he'd gotten out of my pocket. I cannot move. No one knows where I'm at. Even the guy whose trailer we were like crashing at, squatting at, couch surfing, whatever at for the past few days, he's on the other end of the trailer, has no idea what's going on. I could die here and nobody even knows I'm about to die. Nobody will know what happens to me. And, I could feel the skin of my neck like starting to strain. And I panicked and I said, Joe, I don't know what you're doing, but you need to get your shit together now, because I'm not fucking dying in here. So get your shit together. It made me mad. And he took a breath and he said, and I quote, "It'll all be okay. I'll see you in hell." And he did it. He slit her throats. It ended up just nicking his neck, but it, he cut my throat right there. This was 5 years ago, and you can still see it. It was serious. And at which point I spun around and began to fight him for my life. We were both fighting for my life. He is psychotic. He has had a psychotic meth-induced snap from reality. Blood has been drawn. This is it. He has 2 knives. I'm in the fight of my life. It's a knife fight for my life. He has 2 knives and I have none. Stupid me. And so I screamed for the guy whose trailer we were at to call 911. And I put my hands up as a natural like defense mechanism. And it's so typical. I don't know if that's normal or not, but I put my hands up. He has knives. He immediately almost cut my hand off. That happened. And I have 3 serious cuts on my left arm and the one on my right. He made a lot of contact immediately. And I thought, man, he cannot lunge at me. He's going to stab me in the heart. I said in my head that I am not going to fucking die in here. And I said he's making too much contact. I felt no pain as he was cutting me, but I could hear the whoosh of, it sounded like every time he cut me, it sounded like a bed sheet, like a flimsy bed sheet, like ripping, like fabric ripping. And when he cut my throat, it sounded like somebody had ripped a bed sheet right next to my ear. And that is what gave me PTSD for about a year later, was that sound. I don't know why. I'd never really thought about it, but to the degree that I had thought about it, for whatever reason, I thought like ripping flesh or having your throat slit would be like a silent affair. But that's what it sounds like. It sounds like fabric ripping, which I guess in a way it is. And in my mind, no pain. Meth is like coursing through my veins. I'm like bleeding profusely. I was instantaneously soaked. And I was like, he's making too much contact. I have to do something. So I leaned back on my like gashed up arms, and I still had my sneakers on. And I said, thank God I have my sneakers on. And I kicked him as hard as I could. And at this point I was in full blown like fight or flight mode. I could not get out of the trailer. I had already like quickly assessed before he slit my throat, like jumping out a window. I always said to myself, oh, I would just jump out a window. Couldn't do that. That wasn't an option. The windows were like covered. You couldn't get through them. There wasn't enough room. And we were in like this bear hug standoff. Couldn't do that. It was a janky door that was broken. You had to like, we were locked in a room. You had to lift up and jiggle on the handle to even like get it. It's like one of those stupid locks. Couldn't get out. I had to fight him. And I was in full blown like survival mode. And my thoughts were different. I was completely out of my ego, as I've said before. And being in fight or flight mode is what really saved my life. It was the biggest takeaway from this event. It was like Eckhart Tolle says, we are the sky, our thoughts are merely the clouds. We are not our thoughts. And I didn't understand that until I was able to observe my thoughts and look past my thoughts and actually just navigate the present moment from just that, this sense of presence and this desire to live and nothing more. I was like this fine-tuned primal animal, and I kicked him, and I kicked him in the chest, and I kicked him with every single ounce of energy I had, and I kicked him off the ground. We were both still seated when I flung around. We were like fighting. We were both still seated, and he went through the air, and it was like I could see the air underneath him, and it looked like this beautiful almost scene from the Matrix. It really did. And it felt like it was in slow motion. And when he flew through the air, what stopped him was the wall. The bedroom wall broke his, airborne, you know fall or whatever, and it winded him, and that like snapped him to a little bit. It didn't snap him into reality, and even to the degree that it had, oops, the damage was done. It was a commitment at this point, but he wasn't in reality. But when you're fighting a man, just don't ever put yourself in that position. Love yourself enough to not put yourself, spend time with anybody that lacks the capacity to value your life. You have to value your own life to that degree, which I know that now. I did not at the time. But if you are ever in a situation with a partner who is much stronger, much bigger than you, if you kick them, my ex, not this person, but a previous ex before him was abusive. He was holding me down, chastising me. He was standing over top of me, holding me down by the shoulders. I couldn't move, and I headbutted him. It was the only time I ever headbutted anybody, and I broke his nose. It cracked. It gushed blood. If you can headbutt a man and break his nose, kick him in the balls, or knock the wind entirely out of him, they will stop what they're doing long enough for you to ideally run, but ideally just not be in that situation in the first place. But he he stopped what he was doing because he was gasping for breath, and it was the first time at this point I went into shock. It was the first time I'd really had a chance in the couple minutes since, I was fighting for my life, that there was like a lull in the action, and I assessed the wound in my neck. And I'm telling myself, okay, it's been a couple minutes. This is bad. He did not cut your vocal cords. You can speak. And maybe it's started to clot. Maybe it's not as bad as it seems. And I gently put my hand up to my neck just to feel. And I could, this is also a small part of the PTSD that came. The feeling when I put my hand to my neck was shocking. I could feel this wound, but more than that, the blood poured from my wound was pouring from me continuously, nonstop. It had not stopped at all. It was pouring out of me, and I was like, I'm about to bleed out. It poured out of me. It felt like I was holding my hand underneath a faucet. It felt like a overturned like gallon jug of thick, warm milk. The temperature of my blood also really shocked me. It was very hot. It gave me like bloody goosebumps head to toe. And I just was like sitting in this puddle. And I was like, man, I'm thinking about the meth coursing through my veins, the adrenaline, my heart is racing. And I'm thinking, I have to calm my heart right here. This is really serious. But I said, all I have to do is make it until paramedics arrive. That's all I have to do. And the guy said, I heard him yell through the door. He said, man, I had to call 911. That seems like a lot of blood. And so I knew that help was coming. And I think I was kind of going into shock because I just couldn't say anything but look at all this blood. And he said, yeah, my boyfriend who was bleeding, but nowhere near his neck wound at the time was not as bad. That was a major um, thing, major slice. And he said, yeah, I know it is bad. And he came over to me and he helped me get up. And he was so gentle. This is how I knew it was a psychosis and not like a premeditated thing. It was some type of either meth induced or just regular psychosis, because he went from, when he cut my throat initially, the only thing he said is, I can't believe you did this to me. I can't believe you're working for the feds. Then he immediately said, this is a satanic suicide. You need to say it with me. And I did, because I didn't want him to, we were fighting each other, and he tells me to say that. And so I just said it. And then he came over and he helped me get up, like, gently. And he helped me out the bedroom door. And that's when I noticed that the main door to the trailer was open. And it's a trailer. The door is open. I see this sudden exit. And I bolted for the door. It was a few steps. He jumped in front of the door, lunged in front of it. I slipped in my own blood, or in a mixture of our bloods. And that's when he stabbed me in the back, which is honestly ironic. He stabbed me in the back and he slit the back of my throat. And I looked up at him from the ground. He was standing over top of me. And further proof that this was psychosis and not premeditated. I'll never forget, it was so eerie. Even in the moment, it was eerie. He stood over top of me with this look in his eyes, and he was holding the hunting knife. And his eyes had already turned black. When we were fighting, right before I kicked him, I noticed the diligence in his eyes. I noticed his eyes turn menacing, and I noticed his eyes turn black. I didn't think that was something that people actually told the truth about. I thought that was like an exaggeration or something, but no, his eyes turned black when he was slicing at me. And his eyes weren't black anymore, but he was standing over top of me, like hovering over top of me with this hunting knife. And he said, is this okay? And he points at his neck wound almost nonchalantly with a hunting knife, like, and that's how he said, is this okay? Like, and he was asking me, was it deep enough for him to die? And he said, is this enough? And then he said, is this enough? And he points. It was so casual and so eerie. And I was like, man, he is fucking gone. He's been gone. I mean, I knew it, but that was like really confirmation. And I said, Joe, this is all enough. I said, please, 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 just stop. Please stop doing what you're doing. It's all enough. And he said, okay. And he said it like I was chastising him. That's how he said it. He said it like a wounded child. He said, okay. And he looked at me and he fucking drug that hunting knife across his neck, and he dropped it and slumped down. And I really, despite it all, the carnage, I gasped. I thought his head was going to topple off of his body. It just looked like he had beheaded himself. He had not. He just cut his throat. He made sure to cut his jugular. And we were just laying side by side in this tiny hallway. And I said to myself, I just have to stay awake. And I went back to the first time I was in rehab. It was 8 years earlier at the time. It was in 2010. I think. Anyway, I went back to the first time I was in rehab. It was my first attempt at yoga. It was beginner's yoga. And there was a woman that came in that was like hired or volunteered to teach beginner's yoga to a room full of junkies, female junkies, and in recovery. And she told us to say Hong, Saw in our minds. She said, say Hong as in Hong Kong, Saw as in seesaw. And she said, that means the universe and I are one in Sanskrit. And count to 7, inhale, hold it, exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so I tried to lower my pulse, lower my blood pressure, say my Hong saw, my Hong on the inhale, saw on the exhale, the universe and I are one. And that's what I repeated until the paramedics arrive. I didn't want to go to sleep, but I think I did because I was kind of shaken awake and I was